Hi, beloveds. Welcome back to the Enlightened Podcast. I am your host, Uluyanda Kumbuza, and today we're talking all things boundaries. As you know, we are in season 6, which is our soft strength era, where we really are redefining what success looks like, right? So think of a different power more rooted in clarity, intention, and balance. So today's conversation is one that I think we know all too well. That feeling of constantly being on, being overcommitted, and lastly, emotionally drained, often in silence. But more than just naming it, today's conversation, we're going to be exploring how boundaries can save you from burnout. And joining me for this conversation, we have my good friend, my good sister in human resources, Boniwe Dunster, widely known as your HR specialist. She's one of the most passionate and most accessible voices in HR that we have here in this country. She's not just a thought leader, but a translator of HR to real people. She's built her career simplifying workplace concepts and empowering individuals to navigate the world of work with clarity and confidence. And you understand why we need to have a conversation with somebody like that, because we need to get into that confidence and clarity area, right? She's a firm believer in protecting her peace and also her profession. And today she's helping us unpack the power of boundaries as a response to burnout. Boniwe, welcome back, actually. Not even welcome to the Enlightened Podcast.
I've been here before.
Right? Welcome back. It's so good to have you. And I think you're probably going to be one of the voices that we carry and have throughout, every conversation and every season that we have, because you bring so much power and intentionality when it comes to us building our careers. And I think there's so much that we can constantly learn from you.
Thank you.
Let's start off with your journey. What has burnout looked like for you and in your career?
Burnout for me has looked like losing oneself.
Sure.
And losing a sense of identity. And the reason is that, and I'm placing this predominantly from a corporate perspective.
Yeah.
So when you're in corporate and when you are young and you actually have aspirations of making it up the ladder, you give your everything.
Sure.
You give yourself, you give the long hours, you give your weekends, you put your hand up for every project, whether you have capacity or not. When you are asked to do something, you don't say no because you might be judged for saying no. So in that regard, you end up getting into a state of not knowing who you are anymore or what you are doing anymore. And sometimes you find yourself so confused to say, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to do it? What is really expected of me? Not that you don't know, but you want a different interpretation because you have actually taken up so much to an extent that you have forgotten about yourself, your health, your relationships, your friends, your family, because your work actually comes first. So you get to that point of just, not making sense of who you are. And this happened to me like in my young ages, in my like late 20s when I was in management consulting. And it also happened again during COVID.
Yeah.
And so during COVID, I tested positive a number of times. We're not going to talk about how many times. So it took me also, testing positive a couple of times with COVID-19, where I realized to say, you know what, corporate is not everything.
Yeah.
And if it might be everything that we need for survival, for bills, to fill our stomachs and all of that. But there's also life and we need to balance that. And for me, it took COVID-19 to start balancing myself. After that, I started reading a lot of fiction. I started just like letting loose. I stopped opening my laptop on weekends, because then I realized that I could die and they're going to replace me tomorrow, right?
Yeah, they're going to get another HR specialist.
Of course. So I think for me, in corporate, it does look like that sometimes. You just forget who you are, purely because you are always aiming to impress, because you are chasing that next promotion, that next, recognition, that visibility within the organization. And that on its own, it's just not enough.
Just a quick question before we proceed. Is it worth it?
That's a difficult question, right? It is sometimes worth it because in my career, I have been promoted a number of times with different organizations. So the hard work has to a certain extent, paid off. But in the midst of that, you lose a sense of self. Sometimes you lose certain friends at a certain level. Sometimes you also can't catch up with certain things that you have missed because you were chasing something. I remember in 2016, 2017, I had just started a new job. I missed a lot of my friends' birthday parties, like their big 30s. I missed, trips because at that time I had just been promoted and I had just also registered for my post-grad, So for me to show up for my new promotion, to say, yes, I deserve this, and also for me to perform academically, then you lose certain things in life that you can never recover. So there's a number of friends that I've missed their 30th during that time. And unfortunately, I can't go back.
Yeah, sure. The reason why I asked that is because I felt it's so fitting for us to sort of redefine what success means, especially with this season, where we're saying the hustle and bustle culture, yes, it does work, but when you look at it long term and when you look at the sustainability of it, you lose so much, and self, I think, is one of the biggest, right? Apart from just missing the parties or missing other family commitments, once you lose self, for me, it seems like an empty cup. Then what are we then left to consume?
Definitely.
Because everything starts and ends with self. And you've landed us so nicely at that point. You've built a brand around making HR quite relatable, right? How did boundaries become sort of like a key part of your own leadership philosophy and coaching philosophy going forward after you experienced it?
Sure. I think for me, how I made that is because with boundaries and actually within the leadership space and the coaching space, boundaries are very important. If you are going through a coaching session and, your coach is very stern and firm and they want to hold you accountable, you learn to be accountable, right? Because you also don't want to come out of that coaching session empty. It enables you to also set up and give clear communication, boundaries as well. It's important. And also communicating authentically and honestly every time. And the communication becomes clear as well. You're not communicating for the sake of communicating, but you're communicating with intention, right? And also it helps you, especially with boundaries, it also helps you to make people aware to say, when I'm creating boundaries, I'm not saying I am inaccessible. I'm not saying I'm building a wall, but in saying I have boundaries, it means, there's a limit to everything in terms of how I show up, when I show up, both for myself and, for the other person as well. Because boundaries, they're all about also trust. It's all about self-awareness, as well. So people must not take it personally when you're communicating your boundaries and they say, oh, who does she think she is? Why can't we talk to her? It's not about that. Remember, you have certain things that you need to fulfill in your role, in your responsibility at work. There's certain things you need to do within your personal life, with your family, with your friends, and with the relationships that we have. And in that, I also need to show up for team members and for friends and for everybody else. And your boundaries allow you to be able, to split yourself equally where you are needed and where you have the energy to. Because if you make the mistake of not having boundaries, you're going to show up for everything and anything under the sun, even though you are depleted. And you're not going to be showing up to the best of yourself. So you might have been there physically, but emotionally you're not there. And people are going to say, she was there, but she was not happy. Maybe she was jealous and of whatever that was happening. But it was not the case. It's because I forced myself to physically show up where I knew that my energy levels were low. So oftentimes we confuse the boundaries with inaccessibility. And that is actually not the case. You're just saying, I'm one human being. I have multiple responsibilities. And there's certain things that I need to fulfill for myself. And in that, this is how I'm able to show up for you with this amount of time.
I absolutely love that you mentioned that, because I think as you're saying and you're mentioning that point, for me, it's ringing a level of self-trust as somebody that says there's boundaries that I need to I'm responsible to have. Because if I'm also teka-tekaring in my boundaries and how I implement them, people are not going to respect them.
Definitely.
But the first thing I think that we have the responsibility to do as people is that we need to trust ourselves and trust and respect those boundaries before we expect the next person to do so. And many a times, people will realize that they're burnt out once they will feel that sense of, I think I'm losing self, but they often want to hit a wall to know that it must be a physical, bump for them to realize that I might be burning out. What are some of the subtle signs that we often miss apart from just losing yourself, or maybe unpacking it deeper? What would it look like every single day, losing a sense of self and not having meaning or not having the energy?
Yeah. And I think on my end, which you have just mentioned, you lose a sense of motivation. You wake up, you go to this place, and you come back, you ask yourself, what have I done for today? Right? Or you're going to say, what am I going to do today? So that lack of motivation is missing.
Yeah.
The excitement that you used to have, when certain things happen, the excitement is not there.
Yeah.
Then you start questioning yourself to say, is everything okay? Am I in the right state?
Yeah.
What has triggered me not to get excited by X, while in the past 5 years, X used to excite me, right? You don't find meaning in certain things that you are doing. And in a corporate environment, it's when you have always loved your job, but you end up not finding that fulfillment anymore. It doesn't mean anything for you. And maybe it could be because you've reached your ceiling, right? Which is a different conversation altogether. But that happens. Again, it's also just not showing up and not being, available. Sometimes it translates into physical signs, right?
Headache, tired.
You wake up tired and you have your 8 hour sleep, but the 8 hour sleep doesn't translate into any form of any form of energy. And sometimes you also remove yourself from people, right? You just distance yourself, which is to a certain extent needed, because sometimes we do need that solitude. But you realize that you have removed yourself for far too long to say, okay, why for this long, right?
You find comfort in being
on your own, in the
suffering.
morning, in the evening. I remember there was a time where I didn't go out, I think, for the whole weekend. Like, I came back from work. This was a few years ago. I came back from work on a Friday, and then I locked myself in. Like, I didn't go out on a Saturday. I didn't, the first time I went out was Monday morning. It was Monday morning. And if you know me, I'm a church goer through and through.
Sounds like a burnt out girl to me.
And I'm thinking, and the saddest thing also, I'm not sure if it's sad, but it's good. Maybe I also had everything I needed in the house at that point. I didn't even need to go to the shops, right? But I'm like, I haven't opened this door.
The windows,
whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what's going on? So there are certain signs, right? And even the people that energizes you, your friends or your sisters or your siblings, even if, like, you can even see with your relationship to say the way that I'm actually responding to them, it really shows that something is just not, well. So those are some of the things that one needs to, to look out for. And also there's certain things that you love, right? And when you love those things and you can't find the energy to do what you love, or you can't find the energy to do what it's your purpose, it's your gift, it's your talent, and you're neglecting your craft, then you know that I need to rewire myself. I need to regroup, right? Either find a way to have a conversation with someone, find a way to reflect, and even reflections are not as... Your reflections are something else. I was thinking about them to say I've never been a reflection person, because I think it's also not wanting to have that honest truth with yourself,
honest,
right? One-on-one, because it's the hard truth that but you don't wanna admit, But I think in the past few months, especially this year, I've started doing that. It's not as great, but I'm trying, because I actually want to challenge myself and pull up that lever. But then you realize, then you can explain your own emotions. You can explain your own behaviors. When you look back and read at your reflections, then you understand what are certain triggers. When do you get feeling so emotional, so down, so removed? And then you can make sense. What was the environment? Who were the people that I was with? What was done and what was said that got me into this space? And then you are able to actually break that down to make a meaningful understanding of your situation, and what is it that you need to go back to fix. But
for me, when I think about symptoms of burnout or how I feel when I'm burnt out, I think the first point of alert for me is the lack of creativity. Like, you wake up and you're just like, you can't think of anything. You don't want to do anything. It all starts it sort of seems like a mental block
of some sort,
right? And that's when I know, danger. And I think we allow and we ignore certain symptoms until we hit the wall, then we're burnt out. Whereas I think when we experience those pockets of burnout, not full burnout, is where we're supposed to take a step back, regroup, do what you need to do to refuel and get back in. Right. So we shouldn't be waiting for the point where everything comes crashing down before we choose to take care of ourselves. And I think I want us to sit back on there and talk about those myths about boundaries, because a lot of people often think that they're selfish and they're unprofessional. We are when our phone wins because you've got boundaries. How do we sort of challenge that mindset, especially in corporates? Because like you said, we do want to grow. We want to, first in, last out. We want to show the effort, right? But do so in a way that you don't lose yourself, but also you don't overcommit. Because in corporate, but I know that when people see that you are always willing to bend over and backwards, that is going to become your brand.
Definitely. So, like you've said it, the myth is people saying when you're creating boundaries, when people start thinking that you're selfish, and then you are closing people out and you're building a wall. It's not the truth. Basically, with building boundaries, you're also saying, I need to safeguard myself to be able to show up as my best self. Actually, because if I don't safeguard what I have, the little that I have within me, and then it's going to get exploited and I'm going to have to spread myself too thin. And I'm not going to be able to give the best of myself, right? And also, I think what they don't teach us in universities, like these conversations that we are having, they're not taught at school, right? So when you get there and you don't know how to build those boundaries, it's going to be difficult, right? So it's also saying having to find the power of your voice, which is something that I learned a while ago when I was doing my my postgrad in leadership development. They said you need to find the power of your voice, right? So when you know something and when you believe in something, it is your responsibility to voice it out, all right? So you can't make the assumption that your line manager will hear it silently. So it doesn't
Or they
happen.
must know.
Or they must know. And also, it's the art of how you're communicating it. You just don't say no for the sake of saying no, right? If you are being asked to do additional work and you know for a fact that you have a long list of to-do things, you say, I don't have capacity at the moment, but when do you need this thing so that I can factor it in? And the general stuff, is it urgent? Is it important? And all of those things. But it's also saying, I don't have capacity for now, but I'll have capacity in the next 3 weeks. Will that still be within your time frame? So we don't do that. So like I said, when I was young, when I was in my 20s, when I was in management consulting, you always put your hand up, because that putting your hand up also creates visibility for yourself. And we are being taught to say, but you didn't say anything in that meeting. You didn't put your hand up for that project. And that project is going to actually help you to get the next promotion. All right. So for that, we're always putting our hands up. But I think with time, as you start understanding corporate and how it works, then you build the muscle as well to be able to communicate your boundaries and to be able to communicate your capacity as well. So I don't want the young people to think that if they can't, then they're incapable of doing it. It actually, it's a muscle that also comes with time. So it is important for you to communicate, to say, I can do it, but I do have the know-how, but the time now is not. How important is it in for you, and to which deliverable in whatever that we have does it feature in, so that I can be able to reshuffle other things. In certain instances, it's a matter of saying, if you don't understand, then ask your super senior or your line manager to help you navigate that particular, dynamic that you have with another team leader or a colleague where they don't understand, where you say you can't. Because sometimes we also need our line managers to clear the path for us. And this is the mistake that we do, of not utilizing our line managers to the best of what they're supposed to do for us, because their responsibilities is to clear the way for you. However, if maybe that particular boundary, it is with your line manager, you need to articulate it, and you need to say, maybe I need somebody to support me to actually communicate this particular boundary, with you. Probably could be HR, probably could be your mentor or your sponsor within the organization, so that if they hear it from a different angle or from a different voice, then maybe it might land. Particularly, there's certain instances whereby you get calls at night, right? By virtue of the level that you hold in the organization. And you can continue to take those late calls, work late at night, and it's okay. But there are days where you can't, because there's certain things that you need to look into. Probably could be family matters, probably could be a sickly parent, and all of those things. you need to say, you know what, unfortunately this week I'm unable to show up anytime after 6.
Yeah.
I have a sickly mother to look after, and I need to support certain things within the family, and therefore I can't, right? And even if it's personal things, personal interests that you are attending, I'm attending to this particular coaching session or this particular activity for my wellness, therefore I need to give it time, and people might not get it the first time around, but I think it's important for you to continue to reiterate the message.
Be consistent.
Be consistent. And if somebody has called you during that time, when you go back to them, say, I see you tried calling me, but as alluded previously, this is the time that I use for. Therefore, can we pick up on this tomorrow? And trust you me, it's not going to be taken
in a nasty way.
But we need to try. If we don't try, we will never get it right.
Yeah.
The thing is, we all have this know-how and the tools, but it's the application of the tools that we're not, applying correctly because of the fear of the stigma of saying, if I say I can't, what does this mean to my promotion, which is like 6 months away or 12 months away? So sometimes you actually have to balance between those, which is actually quite unfair. But yeah.
I love the points that you're making, and I hope we're taking notes, because we're not getting into the practical ways in which you can show these boundaries in the world of work, right? So in your HR work, you see how about like burnout can show up across teams as well, because you also lead a team. How can organizations sort of start building systems that maybe somehow prevent burnout? And I know there are high performance industries throughout the month, and there are times where there's pockets of pressure in every business. Some businesses, it could be towards month end, it could be that last week building up to month end, and so forth. But are there different things that you feel that organizations can start putting into place? I know, many organizations, more the bigger ones, have things such as wellness nowadays that they're putting into practice. Some people have gyms, some people have stress balls, some people have time out walks, whatever the case may be.
Right.
There's different things being implemented. Do you think that these work, and do they prevent burnout?
Yes, they do actually, because remember, you need to be practical about it. So it's not only about verbalizing it, For example, I know of a finance team that I once worked with, whereby before year end, where it gets busy, so it becomes year end and it becomes audits and all of those things.
Yeah.
The line manager will always insist of people taking leave prior, right? Because they know that the next coming month or a month and a half, it's going to be,
hectic.
It's going to be hectic. So they would insist to say, okay, there's so many of us in a team. How are we making sure that we all take breaks to do anything that we want? You're on your leave, whether you go away, we don't disturb you, so that when you come back, we are energized. And the reason for that is for us to actually prep for the hectic period that we're going to have. So that really works. Secondly, when you're walking around the office and you see your people always sitting at their desk, I think as a line manager, it's only fair to ask your team, but when do you guys go for lunch?
When do you guys stand up?
Yeah, when do you guys go for lunch, right? When are you taking leave?
Guys, why are you always
push them. And also, and this is a simple thing, but I know that a certain line manager somewhere is waiting for HR to tell them to do it, but they don't really need HR to do it. They can do it themselves, for example, So you need to have certain things in place for yourself. Do you guys celebrate each other's birthdays, right? Do you guys go out for lunch as as a team? Do you actually recognize your people randomly as well? There was a time when I bought my team gift vouchers, right? It was at the same time.
I want to be part of our team.
So it was at the same time, I think it was end of March or Feb, but I could actually attribute it to something different to each team member. Right. The other day I walked into our HR room or filing room, and it was so spotless, right? I'm like, what happened to the papers and the files and everything? And they were like, so and so actually cleared it out. And I haven't been aware that they've been doing that, because I hardly ever go there, right? And I realized there were certain things with another team member that has been going over and above every day. Have we done this? Like constantly reminding me, we need to sign this, we need to do this, we need to call this, I've set up this meeting for you. And you don't realize it, but when you sit and reflect, you're like, this person has actually pushed me to certain things. as much as I'm a manager, because you have so many things, right? And another one, it was a birthday. So sometimes find out of the ordinary reasons or moments to celebrate your team. And when somebody celebrates you, automatically you get energized.
Yeah. I want to do more.
You want to do more when you recognize somebody and when you celebrate somebody. You want, and it doesn't have to be in monetary forms, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just recognizing a person in a team, in a public platform. They really appreciate that. So those are some of the things that line managers can really do. Give people time off. There are other organizations that actually give like a mental health day, right? Where you feel that today I'm not unable to show up, and you have that mental health day, which is separate from your sick leave and which is separate from your annual leave day. So that as well also contribute to say there's a time when I am feeling so down and I'm allowed to actually take stock of my emotions and stay at home, and that is also allowed. So we need to start being creative and don't wait for booklets that are going to say this is what you need to do, and
systems.
Systems, and when you fall outside those systems, then it's not it. Line managers actually have the discretion to do a lot of things, but they don't want to utilize the discretion because they're waiting for somebody to tell them to utilize, the discretion. So be creative and sometimes ask your team, guys, I think we have done so well in the past quarter. How can we support you, and how can we celebrate each other? Believe you me, your team always has ideas. You just haven't given them a platform to share those ideas. And some of those ideas are very expensive, right? I remember the time that we went out, was it last year? And somebody says, what is our budget here? I'm like, what do you want with the budget? I took you here for lunch, and they were like, we want to know how far we can stretch it,
I need to order something I wouldn't order when
what I mean? And I just said to them, this is not company money, it's my money. So use your discretion, But I think just make it an effort to co-create those solutions, those solutions, or those how to improve and how to work around burnout with your people. You'd be amazed on what your people can actually come up with.
And I think before I let you go, every time when we're about to wrap, the conversation gets very nice. But I wanted to speak about this guilt, right? And I think we carry it more as professional women than professional men do, right?
Sure.
That if you say no, or if you implement your boundaries, somehow you feel like people are not going to take you seriously, or it's going to stifle your growth.
Sure.
What can we say to that guilt, or what can you say to the woman that's experiencing, or even the man that's experiencing that guilt, to say that I can't stop because now if I stop, I feel guilty, or I feel like I'm not doing enough, or I'm not going to make it for whatever it is that you are working towards?
So I think it's important to also be honest with yourself, but in that honesty, you always need to build a circle for yourself, your board of directors, your trusted advisors, because the mistake that we do as young women and men in corporate is that we want to navigate these dynamics and these challenges on our own, right? So for me, if you don't have a coach or a mentor, like, or a sponsor, find somebody that you trust, that you can bounce your thinking with, right? Where you need to say no, and ask somebody, I have this, and unfortunately I do not have the capacity. How do I put it in a sense that it's not going to seem like I'm saying no, and I'm not going to lose an opportunity that I have lined up, right? Because it's those no's that people remember when they're supposed to make, certain decisions about you.
True.
But remember when she said no then, and they don't even contextualize the no to say why you actually said no. It's just a no. So I think for me it's that if you find yourself in that way, understand why are you saying no. And, also be true to yourself in terms of the reasons why you are saying no. So don't lie and don't say no because people are saying you should say no, so that you start building boundaries. If you can take up on the work, do. But if you can't, articulate why. And get your mentor or your career coach to say, I can't be able to do this. How do I position this with my boss so that it sits well? Because a lot of promotion decisions are based on that, the number of yeses and the number of no's. So it's really important. And also ask to say, by when, I'm saying no now, but when do you really need this to be done? And also to say, okay, at this point in time, I'm overwhelmed and I have number of priorities. As my line manager, can you give me guidance on how to navigate to get to a point of having to deliver? So also utilize your line managers to get things through and things across, right? So what would you do? Or ask them, if you were in my position, how would you navigate this dynamic? Because I do have this dynamic, right? So always get input from people that you trust, people that have your best interest at heart, people that can also be honest with you. It's actually quite important. And senior people as well, because they would have been there themselves. So how did they overcome that dynamic? And yes, probably during their era it was kind of like different, but they can share, you can learn from the wisdom. So never ever make a mistake of trying to solve it, or on
have
your
it all
own.
figured out.
Don't. I can tell you many times I myself have said, and in me sitting, there are people that I have on speed dial.
Yeah.
There are my ex-bosses that I call at 10 p.m. because I'm like, I can't wait for tomorrow. Can I bounce this off you? Or send a text. This is the dilemma that I'm in. How do you think I do it? Right?
This,
And I don't have to take what they are saying as is, but I can take that with my context, right? And try to, and apply it. So I think it's also important. The guilt is real in corporate. So when you're feeling guilty, don't think that you're the only one that's feeling guilty. A lot of people feel guilty. We feel guilty even on this day, So just know that you are not alone, and speaking up to people that you trust. So build those circles, build those safe spaces, whether it could be with friends and with anyone. Have a safe space that you can go back to say, this is the situation, how do I go about it? And be true about it. Your self-awareness is also important, how you show up in your response. So the how of the no, it's important as well. Yeah.
This one is your takeaway, right? So if you had to create a boundary starter pack, right, for someone, someone that's overwhelmed right now, what are the 3 things that you would include in that starter pack?
Right. The first one is to communicate your burnout, right? The reason I'm saying that is because when you communicate your burnout, whether to your colleagues or to whoever, it allows people an opportunity to give you grace.
Sure.
And this is something that we overlook, because we often think that if we communicate our boundaries or when we are burnt out, we're thinking that people will vilify us.
Yeah.
People will show you grace if you're authentic and if you're honest. So communicating your boundaries, it's quite important because people will understand. And then the second one, it's also reminding yourself to say, what is it that sparks light in me? What has sparked light in me all along? Or what is it that excites me? And in that, you need to remember that so that you don't forget who you are and what you are, all right? And thirdly, it's also then just putting a plan together to say, this is what I'm going to do, how I'm going to do it, and how do I regularly going to review the plan or the boundaries that I have put in place. So don't put boundaries for the sake of putting boundaries. Review your boundaries. Are they still valid? Because sometimes boundaries are valid for a certain period of time.
For a certain period, for a certain organization position. That's
so boundaries are not internal, guys. They're not eternal. So it's important for you to review those boundaries. Are they still valid? Are they still serving me? Are they still growing me? If not, then cut those boundaries, create new boundaries. And I think in that starter pack, it's important for you to have that. So you need to communicate your boundaries so people can show you grace. You need to find what excites you so that you can go back to it and, find that little child in you.
Yeah.
And thirdly, have a plan, review your plan of your boundaries, and then start again.
If all else fail, you watch the episode again.
That too.
Yeah, that too. Thank you so much. And I think you couldn't have put it in such a better way. That spark is important because once you see that light, a light doesn't just switch off.
It doesn't.
It goes dimmer and dimmer and dimmer. So monitor that for yourself. And when your light is getting dimmer, find ways in which to, charge it, bring it back up. I also think it's quite important that you have your rituals or your practices that will always refuel you and bring you back. Remember those. Is it going out for the fray? Is it going to movies, the spa? Just time off, no social media, no laptop, no phone. Find that for yourself along with the communication, along with that plan when it comes to your boundaries. And I think you will do just fine. This has been the Enlightened Podcast. Thank you so much to my guest. You will be seeing her again very, very soon. And I hope this conversation was enlightening for you. Till next time. Bye.